How can you prove that 9/11 was an inside job?
There was some sort of explosive.
All the black boxes have been destroyed. He goes on systematic.
We're afraid. This is uncanny. There's 40,000 tons of structural steel designed to resist this collapse.
9/11's full evidence is still not emerged. It is still shrouded in mystery.
He's an architect experienced in steel structures. Now Richard Gage is touring the country with a controversial message about September 11th.
Richard Gage is here to show us why he's calling for a more thorough investigation into the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here.
Well, first of all, give us a little bit more about your background.
Well, I'm an architect of 20 years, a member of the American Institute of Architects, and have been studying steel-framed, fireproof buildings for about that long.
We ask that for clarification because as we get into this, we want people to make sure that you're not just somebody with a wacky idea.
Right.
Okay? You come with some science to you. What is the official reason for the collapse of the World Trade Center towers?
Well, we're told that the planes hit the buildings, and there was an explosion and a fire, and about an hour and a half later, in the case of the North Tower, the buildings collapsed due to structural weakening due to the fires. The problem is that we don't have large gradual deformations associated with collapses, and fires in high-rises have never brought down a steel frame high-rise building at all, ever. And what we have, unfortunately, is the evidence in the Twin Towers and the third skyscraper to collapse that day, which most people don't know anything about it. We have the evidence of the 10 key features of controlled demolition. In the case of Building 7, it collapses straight down into its own footprint at free fall speed in the first 100 feet. It's dropping, as you can see, symmetrically, smoothly, at free fall speed in the first 100 feet, 2.5 seconds. This is uncanny. There's 40,000 tons of structural steel designed to resist this collapse.
Is it, what, a 47-story building?
Yeah, it's just called Building 7, right a football field away from the Twin Towers.
Okay, so what we're showing is left what happened. In fact, right is a controlled where you are using, or the people who made this happen, used demolition.
Indeed, and this is a direct comparison. And you can see that, indeed, almost free fall speed, free fall acceleration through 40,000 tons of structural steel. That is uncanny. So we have 700 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation as a result of this evidence and the evidence in the World Trade Center. That is very explosive. Almost every architect and engineer we show this information to agrees with us that these are controlled demolitions. If we can get them to look at the information, because obviously the implications of a controlled demolition are dark for our country, because that means somebody besides Al-Qaeda was involved, because these have to be easily 3 of the most highly secure buildings outside the Pentagon.
People who saw the airplane, they said it cannot be a passenger carrier. It looked like a military plane. It didn't have any windows.
The plane wasn't no airline or anything. It was a twin-engine, big gray plane.
That was not American Airlines. That was not American Airlines.
It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the side.
Mark, if what you say is true, those could be cargo planes or something like that. You said you didn't see any windows in the side?
I didn't see any windows on the sides. I saw the plane flying low. I was probably like a block away from the subway in Brooklyn, and that plane came down very low.
When questioned about this, Boeing representatives refused to discuss it. This is what the underside of a Boeing 767 should look like.
And when he shows the shooting, when it comes close to the tower, there's another firing done from the wings, which hits the twin tower before the plane.
Widely known video of the attack, shot by Jules Naudet. At face value, it may not look like much. However, upon closer inspection, in case you missed it, one more time. If you look closely, you'll notice that the shadow of the plane meets the building after the flash occurs. This means that the flash is not the fuselage colliding with the building, but rather a separate event. Not to mention that the flash is twice as wide as the fuselage itself. Within minutes of the attack, news teams from all over the city had their cameras trained on the World Trade Center. Therefore, the second impact was covered by almost every conceivable angle. This footage was shot by CNN. On the underside of the fuselage, an extra piece of equipment is visible. The following footage is taken from the documentary Why the Towers Fell. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back. Did you catch that?
The management, the construction company which had constructed the Twin Towers, they said it's impossible. The Twin Tower were made to withstand storm, to withstand tornado. This plane cannot knock it down, and it cannot come down because the fuel burns at 1000 degrees temperature. This, even for 2000 degrees temperature, for hours nothing will happen to it. 10 days later, he changed his statement and said, no, it's possible. Jet fuel can cause damage to the beams. Another professor who gave the statement, he didn't withdraw his statement back, so he was sacked.
Never before in the history of the world has a steel building collapsed due to fire.
I have not seen, until recently, a protected steel structure that has collapsed in a fire.
True infernos have raged hot and long in steel-framed buildings, but not one of the buildings ever came down. In 1975, the World Trade Center's North Tower suffered a nighttime fire that flamed for 3 hours, spreading vertically from floor to floor. It burned twice as long as the fires of 9/11 without even a hint of a building collapse. In February 2005, the Windsor Tower in Madrid, a skyscraper undergoing reconstruction, sustained a 20-hour fire. This is what was left, a standing building strong enough to support a crane. Compare a 20-hour inferno to 90 minutes of smoke. Let's consider the characteristics of steel. Steel is an alloy of iron containing added carbon for flexibility, workability, and strength. In the days of old, blacksmiths heated iron till it was red and pounded it for hours to form it. Horseshoes, knife blades, and plowshares were typical creations. Steel was introduced in the mid-1800s, and by the end of the century, with the advent of the blast furnace, found widespread commercial use. A blast furnace is known as a controlled environment. high temperatures are reached as oxygen is pumped into a closed space. How and when does steel melt? Steel melts at temperatures of 2750 degrees Fahrenheit and above, attained only in a blast furnace or when a powerful incendiary such as thermite is used. Steel or any substance that is burned will never become hotter than the temperature of the fire or heat applied to it. An open-air hydrocarbon fire reaches a maximal temperature of some 1200 degrees Fahrenheit in a dirty or uncontrolled burn, characterized by red-orange flames. Red-orange flames are what we saw on September 11th. Even the fireball caused by the plane strike was red-orange. A controlled burn falls between a dirty burn like a fireplace and a controlled environment, the blast furnace. A controlled burn employs a regulated mix of air and fuel, an example being your gas stove or the engine in your car. You can fire up your gas stove all day long, making soup, roasting a duck, or simmering a stew. Made of steel, your stove will not melt, and nor will your pots and pans. This is a kerosene heater designed for use in any ordinary house. The heater runs on jet-grade kerosene contained in this tank. Made of steel, the heater can operate all night and all day. The kerosene fumes ignite and burn inside it, never causing even the smallest part of this heater to weaken or melt. Yet we were led to believe that these tremendous buildings, framed in steel and surfaced in aluminum, totally collapsed from small scattered fires and 90 minutes of smoke. Take note of these hurtling beams, thrown laterally outward as the tower comes to earth. Would fire have the strength to eject such huge hunks of metal?
Furthermore, information given by the government, phone calls were there. Phone calls said that they said the passengers in the plane, they claimed that they were hijacked. One of the phone calls was by a flight attendant. She says that buildings, water, my God. She's been flying for 12 years. Hasn't seen buildings in New York.
Flight attendant Madeline Sweeney allegedly talked with her ground manager Michael Woodward for 25 minutes. She describes 4 hijackers. The FBI says there were 5. She says the hijackers were in rows 9 and 10. The FAA says they were all in row 8. Near the end, she screams, "I see buildings. Water. Oh my God." Madeline was a flight attendant out of Boston for 12 years. I think she would have recognized Manhattan.
Another person, he says, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham. Mom, can you hear me? We have been hijacked. Do you believe?" The question to be asked, if I'm going to speak to my mom, I will say Zakir. I'll not say Zakir Naik speaking. He said I'm Mark Bingham. Mom, I'm Mark Bingham. If Mark has to speak to the mom, he will say Mark. He will not say Mark Bingham.
A man claiming to be Mark Bingham called his mother Alice, who is visiting his sister-in-law. The caller says, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham. When was the last time you called your mother and used your full name? I just want to tell you that I love you. I'm on a flight from Newark to San Francisco, and there are 3 guys on board, and they say they've taken over the plane, and they say they have a bomb. I'm calling you from the airphone." And then, "You believe me, don't you, Mom?" "Yes, Mark, I believe you. Who are these guys?" Then he was interrupted by someone who was speaking in a low-toned male voice, speaking what sounded like English. After 30 seconds of muffled sounds, the caller repeats, "I'm calling you with an airphone." His mother asks him again, "Who are these guys?" After another pause, he returns and asks again, "You believe me, don't you, Mom?" There was another pause, and the phone just trailed off. To date, none of these calls, except for Betty Ong's call to American Airlines, has been released to the public.
He gave systematic proofs. Do you speak to your mother telling your surname? So all the proofs, all the phones were taped down, and then he did a survey that can the mobile phone work at 32,000 feet. When a survey was done at 4,000 feet, the chances of mobile working is 0.4%. At 8,000 feet, it is 0.1%. And 32,000 feet, it is 0.006%.
Key Dudney of Physics911.net conducted some research of his own. In an experiment called Project Achilles, he took a series of cell phones onto a Cessna 172 and flew up to 8,000 feet to determine the success rate as the plane got higher. At 4,000 feet, he had a 0.4 success rate. At 8,000 feet, he had a 0.1 success rate. For 32,000 feet, cruising altitude for a commercial airliner, he calculated a 0.006 success rate, less than 1 in 100th of a chance.
0.006. There's no chance. And the documentary says that today USA is spending millions of dollars to reach mobile at that height. In 2001 they did it.
Don't believe me? Even American Airlines has put their foot in the government's mouth. On July 15, 2004, passengers aboard a commercial American Airlines flight were able to send and receive calls from their cell phones as if they were on the ground, thanks to a cell station that was installed into the plane. It worked great. I called the office, I called my wife, I called a friend in Paris. They all heard me great, and I could hear them loud and clear. Why would American Airlines spend thousands of dollars on this technology in 2004 when cell phones worked so well on September 11, 2001? The cell phone calls were fake, no question about it. So how is it possible to fake a person's voice? In 1999, the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico revealed their voice morphing technology. General Carl W. Steiner, the former Commander-in-Chief of United States Special Operations, declared on tape, "Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government." Another example was Colin Powell, saying, "I am being treated well by my captors." With just a 10-minute recording of somebody's voice, they are able, in almost real time, to clone someone's speech. Steiner was so impressed, he asked for a copy.
That there are black boxes. Every plane has got 2 black boxes, and the black boxes can withstand a temperature of 3,000 degrees centigrade for several hours. And in just 1,000 or 2,000 degrees, all the black boxes have been destroyed. He goes on.
A commercial plane carries 2 different black boxes. Each black box carries one of 2 different recorders, a cockpit voice recorder and a flight data recorder. The cockpit voice recorder records sounds from inside the cockpit, including engine noise, stall warnings, and other sounds of interest. Communications between air traffic control, weather briefings, and conversations between pilots and crew are also recorded. The flight data recorder records at least 28 different parameters such as time, altitude, speed, and heading. Some also record more than 300 other in-flight characteristics, anything from autopilot to smoke. The 9/11 Commission says the CVRs and FDRs from American 11 and United 175 were not found. Yet, the FBI claims to have found the passport of Saddam al-Sakami, which managed to fly out of his pocket, through the explosion, and onto the streets of Manhattan below. So, 4 different black boxes, made from the most resilient materials known to man, were destroyed. Yet, a passport, made from a fragile material known as paper, managed to survive? Who writes this stuff? Ted Lepatkowitz, spokesman for the National Transportation Safety Board, told CBS News that it's extremely rare that we don't get the recorders back. I can't recall another domestic case in which we did not recover the recorders. Turns out Ted's right. Nicholas DeMasi, a firefighter who helped the recovery efforts, claims in the book Behind the Scenes, Ground Zero, "At one point, I was assigned to take federal agents around the site to search for the black boxes from the planes. There were a total of 4 black boxes. We found 3. I guess it all comes down to who you'd rather believe." FBI Director Robert Mueller said Flight 77's data recorder provided altitude, speed, headings, and other information, but the voice recorder contained nothing useful. And Donald Rumsfeld said the data on the cockpit voice recorder was unrecoverable. As for Flight 93, it was the only flight where the cockpit voice recorder was recovered. It was played for the families in April 2002, but not before they signed an agreement saying that they wouldn't talk about it. They couldn't even take notes. And for some reason, the last 3 minutes of the tape was unaccounted for. The FBI had no explanation for the discrepancy. Why would the 9/11 Commission tell us Flight 11 and 175's recorders weren't found? Why would Robert Mueller tell us that there's nothing interesting on Flight 77's? What's on the last 3 minutes of Flight 93's cockpit voice recorder? These are vital questions that need to be answered. It's an interesting postscript that Flight 93 was spotted on April 10, 2003 at Chicago's O'Hare Airport by David Friedman, a United Airlines employee who records all of his flights. The tail number, N591UA, was spotted on Flight 1111, a United Airlines 757. And according to the FAA, both N591UA and N612UA, Flights 93 and 175, are still valid. But Flights 11 and 77 are listed as destroyed. Not to mention that they were not even scheduled to fly on September 11th.
Regarding the second attack at Pentagon. At Pentagon, when the airplane crashed, there was no scraping on the grass. Nothing. Only a hole in the Pentagon. And the hole was only equal to the body of the plane. And we see a crater, and they showed on the television, but when the wings went, the wings weren't seen outside, neither were the window panes damaged of the Pentagon. If a plane body goes in and the wing stays out, either the wing will remain outside or the window pane will damage. The building was intact. So how could only in the circumference of a body of a plane, how can the wings go in as well as the tail? I mean, it's fabricated.
As we went through all these photographs, we could find no pictures whatsoever showing a tail, a nose, a fuselage, wings, engine, wheels, luggage, seats, nothing. There were no photographs showing any recognizable wreckage from a 757. Furthermore, when you look at the size of the hole of the Pentagon, it was approximately 65 feet across, and the height of the Pentagon is approximately 73 feet. From wingtip to wingtip, a 757 is 124 feet 10 inches. From nose to tail, a 757 is 155 feet and 3 inches in length, and the height is 44 feet and 6 inches. However, when you look at the hole of the Pentagon, you'll find that it's only approximately 65 feet across. How does a plane of those dimensions fit into a hole only 65 feet across? Upon further inspection, we found that the damage at the Pentagon was completely and totally inconsistent with the damage of the planes that had hit the World Trade Center. I mean, after all, the planes that hit the Trade Center created a fire so intense that it fatigued the steel and collapsed the buildings, or so that's what we were told. And yet, when you look at the left side of the Pentagon, you'll note that there is very little, if any, smoke damage or heat damage at all. On the third floor, it's very plain to see a file cabinet with a computer monitor. Neither of them are damaged. On the second floor, you can see a wooden desk. It hasn't burned. And on the first floor, a very curious sight indeed, a wooden stool with a book that is laying and open. The pages aren't even singed.
The people who said that, the plane went just 40 feet above my head. Today science tells us that Boeing is flying at 40 feet above my head, that car will fly away. An interview was taken of an ex-military person. He said it sounded like a missile. It had to be a missile. The missile will make that hole. And there was no debris. There was debris, only little bit debris. There was no part of the plane found there. There was only a small engine of a fighter plane found there. Even in the other plane, they only find it. Regarding the second attack at Pentagon. At Pentagon, when the airplane crashed, there was no scraping on the grass. Nothing. Only a hole in the Pentagon. And the hole was only equal to the body of the plane. And we see a crater, and they showed on the television, but when the wings went, the wings weren't seen outside, neither were the window panes damaged of the Pentagon. If a plane body goes in and the wing stays out, either the wing will remain outside or the window pane will damage. The building was intact. So how could only in the circumference of a body of a plane, how can the wings go in as well as the tail? I mean, it's fabricated.
As we went through all these photographs, we could find no pictures whatsoever showing a tail, a nose, a fuselage, wings, engine, wheels, luggage, seats, nothing. There were no photographs showing any recognizable wreckage from a 757. Furthermore, when you look at the size of the hole of the Pentagon, it was approximately 65 feet across, and the height of the Pentagon is approximately 73 feet. From wingtip to wingtip, a 757 is 124 feet 10 inches. From nose to tail, a 757 is 155 feet and 3 inches in length, and the height is 44 feet and 6 inches. However, when you look at the hole of the Pentagon, you'll find that it's only approximately 65 feet across. How does a plane of those dimensions fit into a hole only 65 feet across? Upon further inspection, we found that the damage at the Pentagon was completely and totally inconsistent with the damage of the planes that had hit the World Trade Center. I mean, after all, the planes that hit the Trade Center created a fire so intense that it fatigued the steel and collapsed the buildings, or so that's what we were told. And yet, when you look at the left side of the Pentagon, you'll note that there is very little, if any, smoke damage or heat damage at all. On the third floor, it's very plain to see a file cabinet with a computer monitor. Neither of them are damaged. On the second floor, you can see a wooden desk. It hasn't burned. And on the first floor, a very curious sight indeed, a wooden stool with a book that is laying and open. The pages aren't even singed.
The people who said that, you know, the plane went just 40 feet above my head. Today science tells us that if Boeing is flying at 40 feet above my head, that car will fly away. An interview was taken of an ex-military person. He said it sounded like a missile. It had to be a missile. The missile would make that hole. And there was no debris. There was debris, only a little bit debris. There was no part of the plane found there. There was only a small engine of a fighter plane found there. Even in the other place, they only find a crater. And immediately, after a couple of weeks, Osama bin Laden, he gives an interview on the Ummah magazine. And he says that I am a Muslim, I will not lie. According to me, killing innocent women is prohibited, it is wrong. Killing innocent children is wrong. Killing any innocent human being is wrong, and Islam condemns it. Osama bin Laden giving an interview and saying that a couple of days back you get a video clipping from Al Jazeera. Osama bin Laden training 9/11. Because 75 professors say it's an inside job, now they manipulate, and after 5 years they're showing on the television. Why? So here we realize everything, it was inside job. And these 75 professors, they are
thinking of Al-Qaeda as a terrorist group. I know that there was a conference in January 2001 which you attended, at which you felt that bin Laden was better described as a religious warrior and should not actually be thought of as a terrorist.
No, we said unless the evidence is brought up out against him, then he is not a terrorist. It's wrong. And even 9/11's full evidence is still not emerged. It is still shrouded in mystery. And a lot of people have a lot of misgivings about that. And it's not only me. I think a lot of people in America would be thinking the same way. There are scientists, there are scholars who have written articles on it. So I think to dub a man as terrorist, because I know I heard him twice say on radio or something like that, and I think it was Osama, not only that, but Mullah Omar also said that he did not believe that Osama had carried out that act. So that is still a mystery and it needs to be resolved. Americans have still to set up a proper commission or inquiry commission into this event. I think that's very important, and I think President-designate Obama would do well to set up an inquiry commission into this.
What is your hunch as to who perpetrated the 9/11 attacks?
Well, I have been on record and I said it is the Zionists with the newcons. They have done it. It is an inside job and they wanted to go on the world conquest. They were looking upon it as an opportunity window when the Muslim world was lying prostrate. Russia was nowhere in sight. China was still not an economic giant that it has turned out to be. And they thought that this was a good time to go and fill those strategic areas which are still lying without any American presence, and of course to control the energy tap of the world. Presently it is the Middle East and in future it is going to be Central Asia. So there are many things, and of course
but you think who were
that's
the
what I also think,
who was
yes.
at the heart of who do you think was at the heart of plotting 9/11?
It's very difficult, really. I wouldn't point my finger at it, but I think it was planned in America, and at least one knows that it was done in Germany as far as the reports go. But I think the heart of planning was inside America, because the job was done there, but not a single person so far has been captured, caught, interrogated inside America, even though this entire episode took place there.
The reason is only to attack Afghanistan, Iraq, and then Iran. They have been predicting that Iran is going to be attacked. They want to have control of the oil-rich countries. So this terrorist attack is for what? One is injustice. Second is for money, is for power. And when a politician finds that he's going to lose the vote, he creates a fear psychosis. Okay, better elect me, or the Muslims will get you, and they elected. Same thing in Gujarat. A fear psychosis was created. If you don't elect us, the Muslims will kill you, and the government came back in power.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And I said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there and didn't have much time to think about it.
Now wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day. So how could George Bush have seen what he said he saw?
And people who went to rescue, whether it be the firemen they were interviewed, they said that we were thinking that someone up was pressing the bomb button and the bombs were going on boom, boom, boom. So how the Twin Towers come down, they have given proof.
How do these firefighters describe the collapse of the North Tower?
We started running, floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was like, if they had detonated.
Yeah, detonated.
Planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
And others give similar descriptions.
At 10:30, I tried to leave the building, but as soon as I got outside, I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Like, it sounded like gunfire. You know, bang, 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 bang. And then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
Started walking down the stairs to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Goes back into the 8th floor.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion, but it was a huge explosion.
Chief Albert Turry told me that he was here after the events that took place this morning. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place, and then an hour after there was another explosion in one of the towers here. So according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
Reports of bombs in the buildings, explosions. A CBS reporter to Dan Rather.
But I was coming toward the World Trade Center looking for CBS crews and asked a firefighter if he saw any. All of a sudden, there was a roll, an explosion, and we could see coming at us a ball of flame stories high.
So tell me how you're feeling. How did you get there? What happened to you?
I worked for the Trade Center, one of the carpenters, and I was going to go do a job. And I got on the elevator, and the freight elevator, and I heard the first explosion, and the elevator blew up, the doors blew up, and it dropped. And I was lucky that the elevator got caught between two floors.
Which floors?
The B levels, the basement levels, with all the, you know.
Furthermore, they say that all the proofs given by the government they analyzed. They said 19 hijackers, some of them, they were trained as flying off the plane. They went to the university and they interviewed the professors. Do you think that this person can do such an act? Impossible. The way the plane took a turn, and I have personally spoken to senior pilots who have flown big Boeings and Airbuses for several years. They said it's impossible to take such a turn. And imagine just a new person, a few hundred of us takes a turn. What the experts say, it has to be a military plane.
So what they did 10 years ago, and they may have put it on the drawing board 20 years ago. What they did 10 years ago was to tell a big lie. No, sorry, more than a big lie. Because there are three categories of lies. There are ordinary lies, and then there's the big lies, and then there's 9/11. 9/11 was crafted to give the Americans and the British and NATO and Israel the opening to destroy Pakistan's nuclear weapons. It's very convenient to have Afghanistan as the location. Some people in a cave in Afghanistan are the ones who send the aeroplanes to attack the World Trade Center. You believe that? You have peanuts in your head.
Congressman, it's Willie Geist. I just want to follow up on something you said a minute ago, that you suspect Pakistan will be the place the United States occupies next. Do you have information on that, or that implies there'll be some sort of an invasion?
No.
Why do you say that?
Just because I looked at what has happened in the past 30 or 40 years of all the unintended consequences and what we have done and how we are spreading and the attitudes that has been pervasive in our government for the past 10 years, that we have this obligation to spread our goodness and protect our financial interests. And right now, Pakistan is a big problem. And the people there, we have created a civil war there, and the fact that we go over there and we violate their security, and the people rebel against the government because they see their government as being a puppet of the American government. So it's total chaos, and I am afraid, I hope I'm absolutely wrong, but I'm afraid we will be in Pakistan trying to occupy that country, and it will probably be very unsuccessful.
All right, Congressman Ron Paul, thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ron.
Reports from the White House spokesman Ari Fleischer saying President Bush regards this as an historic moment.
And a further 200 have been injured. Now it does seem that for the course of the day those numbers could climb dramatically. The Israeli army has confirmed that they carried out this airstrike. We know that at least 30 missiles, air-launched devices, where their eyewitnesses say they heard at least 16 explosions throughout the Gaza Strip.